Hello everybody, and today we are going to be checking out a scenario where WICSO China forms an empire. Now, WICSO China is a country that has existed for a very long time, and they've been through many states, but this is one of their weaker states. But we're just going to be throwing that out the window, and we're going to be saying that they get a new government, and their military is buffed, and they're going to be able to go on a militaristic conquest. If you guys do enjoy today's scenario, then please consider liking and subscribing. We are aiming for 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And yeah, let's get straight into today's scenario. Now, relatively, China is already a pretty strong country. If you look at the top 10 list, they are number 3, just behind India and America. India is definitely going to be a regional rival because they are kind of in the same area and the same kind of weak countries are between them. So it could turn into a little bit of an espionage thing, but we're just going to be ignoring all kind of like outside relations and only focus on China. Now, there are these two nations, and they are probably protected by the Assembly of Nations, which, if you're wondering, it does not exist. And that is just for all intents and purposes, so China can form their empire. And like the military alliances, if the AN tries and like step in, well, they can't because they don't exist. And these two were countries that were made from the lost territory of China, and I think they want that territory back. So they're going to be invading this northern green one. I'm not really sure how strong these guys are. Chances are they are probably pretty weak. And that is shown even more as I think their only major city. No, they have 2 major cities, but this is the one that has been captured. And it's probably also the more populated one. But yeah, Chinese militants and militias are going to have no issue just kind of going around this country and easily encircling their capital. Eventually, separate divisions are going to be sent south to try and capture any population pockets. And a division is going to be sent along the border of the Seafoam Green country to attempt to capture this city, and that does go successfully. Eventually, with all of their population taken, the capital area is forced to surrender. But there are going to be some guerrilla war fighters in the south. Primarily in the north, there is actually a bit more, open arms for China. But in the south, there's definitely going to be a lot more guerrilla warfare, but eventually the Chinese military would wipe it out. And in this treaty, we see full annexation. Now, the world would definitely be alarmed at this because China was a key player in World War V. A lot of espionage between them and America had a lot of countries, and they were kind of like proxies. But the Assembly of Nations, which I keep saying they don't exist, but I guess kind of a commonwealth of a whole bunch of nations over here, are going to denounce China's actions. But China does not care less because they're going to invade the Dark Blue team. But we also see South China getting in on this. And these guys have no major cities. They are probably in the most cooked location. So, yeah, they're going to fall pretty easily. Now, I'm not sure how friendly South China is with regular China. I know that in the World War III era, they were pretty friendly. In fact, they were in the same military alliance. But I think Adis Pro did say that these two were kind of drifting apart. If you look at the top 10 strongest countries, he did reference that South China was number 7 and that, they're kind of growing away from China. Because China kind of always acted as a forefather for South China. But I think they're starting to move away from that era. Alright, with all the yap done, these guys are definitely going to fall. And with the capture of their capital, the partitioning is pretty much going to be straight down the middle, looking like this. And now we can take a look at the partitioning of the Dark Blue team. And this is the line that our peace treaty is going to abide by. China gets the North 2 provinces, and South China gets the southern areas. And that looks really bad. So South China is going to even it out a little bit by the invasion of Bangladesh. I know this doesn't really include China. This is just kind of me fixing the border gore. And India does have some lost territory here, so they would most likely team up with the South Chinese. And yeah, Bangladesh was just recently released after their fascist regime fell, and I'm sure this isn't the greatest for them. And yeah, they're dead. This area has not that many provinces. But it does not matter, just getting a very quick war out of the way, we see the treaty looking like this. And I think South China is actually getting a little bit of a stronger empire than China, so that's kind of ironic. But who cares, because now we're going to be pivoting back over to China. Now, if you look at the ideology, then you see that China is a flawed democracy. This makes sense. They were just toppled from their elitist regime. And these guys are a full democracy, so China could invade them, but it probably could warrant a coalition from other true democracies, such as the Siberian country. So Chinese special forces are going to begin to move around the border and just start to look at the purple team's defenses. And with espionage, they're able to see that these guys formed as a democratic coalition against Korea may not be upholding their democratic values. As a rebellion is going to pop up inside of the purple country, and this rebellion is going to want to join China. This is most definitely backed by China, and this rebellion is actually going to get a lot of speed and a whole bunch of the values that China is ensuing is definitely going to find their ways into the nooks and crannies of this country. Basically, the major population pockets in the rural areas are going to rise up for China, and eventually the northern half is going to pivot over towards China. And yeah, this is no bueno. The rebellion is so powerful to the point where we even see some of these smaller powers in the world, like Korea, they're going to get the jump on the purple team as well. Korea has been in like the 5th isolationist state they've ever been in, and yeah, they've been isolationist for a while. And eventually this allows for their military buildup, and it's going to allow them to capture the capital, and the rest is going to concede with the rebellion. And now we can take a look at what this peace treaty will look like. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. There are two very small lines, but that is going to indicate that China is going to grow a lot. First of all, Korea is going to get these territories, and China gets these territories. That's big. That's really big. And these guys were never really liked by the Chinese or the Koreans. Like I said, these guys were democratic forces that were backed by China when Korea fell. So primarily that's why Korea didn't like them. But it's just, they also fell for the way of the Chinese Empire. This thing would definitely not survive on its own. Most likely it would unite with Korea, but I kind of like how it looks, and I enjoy how pathetic it is, so it's gonna stay. And these guys are terrified because they have two very hungry powers on their doorstep, and it's going to be no different. Korean troops go into the gold country, and that is followed by Chinese troops. Now, Korea, during their isolationist state, really ramped up their military production. It's to the point where they're probably stronger than like the Siberian country or the gold country. Those are just some more of your moderate powers, but that does mean that Korea is starting to rise up the ranks. Chinese divisions are going to just pummel through the gold team. These guys, I'm not really sure if they're actually strong or not, but a couple of people inside the gold team are going to be really nationalistic about their country and its communist values. And they're going to attempt that by civilian arms. And civilian arms basically just means that the civilians are going to sign up, not really sign up, but they're just going to go to the front line and just murder a whole bunch of Chinese people. It's not the best form of military combat, but it's basically all of the military combat that the gold team can resort to right now. And these civilian militias are actually going to do a pretty good job. And you might be wondering, why is China not fighting back against this? Well, it's because, of course, they are going to absolutely demolish them. Two spearheads are going to form, and eventually they are going to link up with each other, and eventually there is a massive civilian militia encirclement, and yeah, they're all slaughtered. And like I said, this was the gold team's final resort. So eventually, after the Koreans are able to encircle their capital, they're going to go ahead and surrender over to the Koreans and the Chinese. So now we can take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, and this is what we see our peace treaty looking like. It is going to be an entire partitioning of their country. Korea gets these territories south of this line, and everything north of it will become China. But also, you might be wondering, what about Sakhalin? They are one entire province, but to hold friendly diplomatic relations, the Koreans and the Chinese are going to split it up, with primarily the more valuable parts going over to Korea, but the majority of the territory going to China. So a bit of a friendship is going to start to flourish between the Chinese and the Koreans. But China does not really have any more easy targets around them. You could go south, but that is the 7th strongest country in the world. You could attack these guys, but what would that really do for you? You can't attack the Unitarians because they are in the Unitaria Alliance. Tibet is your old ally, and they're really strong. And I just realized I never erased this capital. The gold team, they barely border you. Siberia, you go after Siberia. And that's exactly what they're gonna do. Chinese troops march across the border into the seafoam green country. And a lot of the true democracies around the Chinese country, they're going to be like, wait, what? Okay, let's see. They've attacked one true democracy, and the rest have been flawed democracies. But that is still democracy that they are putting at stake. And there are most likely some scholars that are starting to question, is China even a democracy anymore? There is a lot of aspiration for war inside of China, so it's probably not totalitarian. But most likely, it is probably a civilian-encouraged dictatorship. And China is going to use that to get the civilian aspiration up to a very large amount. Chinese troops just start to absolutely demolish the front line. Eventually, a militia is going to start to seep into the northeast. And yeah, Siberia is kind of cooked. And China is getting dangerously close to their capital. But a couple of countries are going to start to put their foot down. Tibet is going to join on the side of Siberia, as well as the gold team. Most likely, there would not be too much fighting on this front line. It would probably just be their joining of the war for justification to send them supplies. But the gold team and the Tibetans are going to start incursions of their own, most of them actually going into Siberia to attempt to try and reestablish their populated areas. And that goes moderately well. Korea is most likely sending active aid to the Chinese capital. And the main reason that Tibet joined and fought, not the reason they joined, But the reason that they are invading into the Chinese territory is so they could protect this cluster of cities and capture another one. Now, I'm not really sure how South China would feel about all this. They were definitely close with China in the past, and those ties are probably still there. But like I said earlier, they're definitely starting to grow away from China. So I could see South China would most likely stay neutral, but everybody on this front line is just going to be killing each other. Though they are going to start to ramp up their invasion, and they capture a major city mere miles away from the capital. They start to fight back against the gold team, but see minimal success. And that is because that front line is where a bulk of the Tibetan troops lie. Tibet is going to hold their own over here, but in the center we are going to see Chinese pushbacks, one getting dangerously close to the city. The gold team army, though, they are going to just continue into Chinese territory, and Chinese falters on the front line are going to prove evident. But China has just reinforced their front line and their ideals over here in the northeast, now gaining a major amount of territory and scoring a lot of decisive victories. China, I think, is 100% winning this war at this point. At this point, they even have enough reserves to fight back against the gold team and subsequently as well as the Tibetans. But once again, like I said, the Tibetans are most likely having all of their forces up here, so that's why the Chinese are getting absolutely pummeled by this front line. But China has made a major advancement into the war as they have encircled the capital and demolished it. This is seen as major for the Chinese country because, well, you're fighting them and you captured their capital, so that is a development that is going to allow you to gain a lot of territory in a peace treaty. I don't really know if it's important to the war, but Korea is just going to invade the purple team. Not really much to this, just Korea, a common interest, yep. But Korea is going to start to ramp up their aid, and they were just going to wipe out this purple country because they thought maybe they could try and fight back against the Chinese and maybe even the Koreans. So maybe a little bit of paranoia got to Korea, but China is just going to continue in this front line, and I don't know how realistic it is that there are like 5 cities in the middle of the Siberian tundra, but one after another, China is going to continue to capture them. And this is the point where we're going to see a massive surrendering over here in the north. All of this territory and the civilians and the militias that are guiding it are going to surrender over to China. This is very bad because now your entire justification for this war has faltered. So now with Chinese occupation, this isn't really occupied land, it's just land that is seceded over to China. China is going to be able to focus their armies now over here, pushing back the gold team, and it is now the Tibetans getting pummeled in this front line as they are all pushed out and forced to go back to their home country. And that is because Chinese advancements have just begun into Tibet. They reach over and they meet the border of the gold team, and a mass evacuation of Tibetan troops is going to occur. 80% of them are going to get into the gold country, but it is way too late as 20% are lost, and that is probably a couple 100,000 men. China is now going to start to spill their army into the gold team, and yeah, I think Tibet and the gold team should surrender by now because the remaining pockets filled with guerrilla warfare have even just stopped. And now you guys are getting pummeled because 4 of your major cities have been captured, and 2, going to be 3 of your major cities have been captured. More front lines are going to start to appear themselves as the occupied lands actually become occupied, not just concessions. And they're going to fight against the gold team, of which is going to surrender. Not like this, but just kind of as a ceasefire. And as Tibet loses all hope with their push out over here in the Chinese areas, they're going to surrender as well. So now we can take a look at this peace treaty for this coalition and how it is going to be absolutely demolished. And this is what we see our peace treaty looking like, and I forgot that this happened. But moving away from this to the actual stuff that happened, we see a lot of lines that are going to be very beneficial to China. The smallest of which is going to be over here in Tibet. They get a very small amount of territory. But up here, there are 2 very big lines. One of them represents actual land gain for China, and the other represents a puppet state. Oh, what the hell? Okay, don't know what that was, but they do create a puppet state over here. And yeah, big China. Yeah, scary. Scary stuff. But where does China go from here exactly? You have a peace treaty with Tibet and the gold team, and going after the Siberians, you could do that, but that would be pretty counterintuitive. You could go after South China, but At this point, you're probably way past America in military strength, and probably rivaling India. But you're not going to be doing any of that because this video is over. If you guys did enjoy today's scenario, then please consider liking and subscribing. Remember, 1,000 subscribers by December 31st. In the recent days, the subscriber growth has slowed down a little bit. It's about like maybe 10 or 15 a day. But the growth earlier in the past couple weeks was insane. It was like 50 subscribers a day or something crazy like that. So I do want to thank you guys for that. But yeah, I will see you guys in tomorrow's video.